Welcome back to the Institute for Popular Music here at the University of Rochester. In this video, I want to talk to you about some of the DVDs or video performances or documentaries that you can get on the Rolling Stones. I've tried to pull out some of the ones that I've found the most useful, and I'll tell you which ones they are and why I think they're useful. Probably the first one that you should get a hold of, however it is that you get a hold of videos, is this most recent one called The Rolling Stones Crossfire Hurricane. This was brought out as part of the 50th anniversary of the group, and it's a pretty good overview of the career of the band, with emphasis really on the 60s, then secondarily on the 70s, and then after that a little bit more of what's happened since then. So it's a fantastic one. There's also a pretty good video put together by Martin Scorsese on the Rolling Stones called A Shine a Light, and this is also very entertaining. From a historical point of view, I think the Crossfire Hurricane is probably more of the kind of documentary in terms of covering some of the material that we'll talk about in this class. But the Martin Scorsese one, very good as well. Some of the stuff that gives us a sense of the Rolling Stones in performance, and you know, that's when you look at videos, it's great to have people telling us about the history of the group, but you know, you're getting that in the lectures here, and of course there are the books that I talked about in the first special features to get that. We really want to get a sense as the Rolling Stones live on what all that was about. Well, this one here, the Rolling Stones Charlie Is My Darling, is a documentary on their tour of Ireland in 1965. So if you want to get a sense of what those crazy scenes, the kind of tour madness and all that kind of thing is that went on around the Rolling Stones about that time, this is a fantastic document. You get to see them playing live, you get to see them behind the scenes. It's a very, very well-made film. Charlie Is My Darling, this one. Another one, maybe sort of the best of the live ones, is the one, Ladies and Gentlemen, the Rolling Stones. Now, this gives us a sense of the Rolling Stones in the early 70s, right after the Exile on Main Street period. This is the Mick Taylor version of the group. So you can get a chance, in the Charlie Is My Darling, you get a sense of how small, in a certain sense, those concerts were in the 60s, how small the amplifiers were in the public address system, the vocal amplification, that kind of thing. Here, you get the Stones more sort of in the stadium kind of context, as we'll talk about in the videos. Things really change in terms of live context from the 60s concerts to the 70s concerts. This is a pretty good example of the Stones in the early 70s. Another one that you might want to focus in on for live performance is the Rolling Stones Rock and Roll Circus. This is that television program that was supposed to air on English television in December of 1968, but which for various reasons Mick Jagger decided, or the band and Mick Jagger decided they didn't want to show. But you get performances by a lot of other people. You get Jethro Tull here, The Who, Taj Mahal, Marianne Faithfull, the Dirty Mac. That's John Lennon, Eric Clapton, and Yoko Ono. You get some great Rolling Stone stuff too, including a fantastic rendition of Sympathy for the Devil. I talk about it in the videos when we get to that, and so this is the place to go and see that particular performance. Speaking of Sympathy for the Devil, here are a couple of videos that I talk about in the lectures that are really good sort of documents of the Stones from the late 60s. This first one, Sympathy for the Devil, a Jean-Luc Godard film, features the Rolling Stones in part. There's a lot of other stuff there too, and if you're in any way put off by sort of Marxist political activism, you're probably going to have a lot of patience for the other stuff that's not the Rolling Stones in this particular video. But the great thing about the video is you get to see the Rolling Stones working on the song Sympathy for the Devil from in Olympic Studios from the very earliest, you know, when they just bring the song in on acoustic guitar until they finally work it up at the very end. So it's a fantastic way of seeing the process of what went on with Rolling Stones music as they started to take more time in the studio to develop these increasingly ambitious recordings. This other one, Gimme Shelter, the one that's done by David Maysles, Albert Maysles, and Charlotte Zwiren. This is This is the document of the Stones during the 1969 American tour that included the stop in Muscle Shoals to do some recording, Muscle Shoals, Alabama, and also includes the Altamont incident where a young fan was killed. So you're going to want to check this one out because it's just really fantastic footage and very, very, very well done, and really sort of gets us the Stones at the very end of the 60s. So between this one giving us clips from the 69 American tour and, ladies and gentlemen, the Rolling Stones, the one I mentioned earlier, giving us clips from the tour from the early 70s, 71 I think it was, you really get a sense of the group live from that period. And then finally, there's one last video that's I think very, very interesting. It's called Stones in Exile. And this one really gives you a really detailed look into the period around the recording and finishing of the album Exile on Main Street. So it deals with all the business of the tax exile, all those sessions in France, and then moving to Los Angeles to do overdubs and mixing and that kind of thing, including, you know, critical response and various kind of look-backs from people in the band and other artists about what that album has meant. It really is a first-class documentary on a particular album. The one thing you'll find really in all of these videos and the books that I mentioned in the first special feature is they don't spend a lot of time talking about the music per se, or about the development of the music, the musicians, the styles, and the influences. They really tend to focus in on the personal aspect of who these guys are as musicians and as artists and this kind of thing. It's very, very valuable. You can see why they do it, because that's the kind of thing that appeals to most fans. A lot of fans are really more interested in the stars as people and as performers than they are really in the musicology behind all of it. So I think the result of that is that these videos and the books that I talked about in the first video, the first special feature, are really complementary to what it is that we're doing in this course. So when you take the more sort of scholarly and musicological information that we do here and put it together with what's in the books and these videos, I think you get a much wholer and more complete picture about the history of the Rolling Stones.